Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Strength and Speed owner and Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Obstacle Course Racer, Evan Perperis. Joining me for this week's episode, my co-host is back, filmmaker Bobby Ross. Bobby, welcome back.
Hey, Evan. Thanks for having me on again, dude.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the Bobby Ross episodes. I hope other people are too, because I think they're pretty amusing. And we got a special guest on the line. We're going to introduce him in a second. Quick word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Yolked. Yolked makes it's called Protein's Perfect Partner. So essentially fertilized egg yolk that's been pasteurized and made, safe to eat. And it's supposed to increase muscle protein synthesis by 3 times the amount based off clinical trials. And I've been using it for the last 2 years. It's awesome. Tastes really good. I actually want to eat a giant bowl full of it, even though it comes in these little pouches. But yeah, if you want to check out Yolked, you can head over to Yolked and use code STRENGTH20 for 20% off. And then check out their Instagram, Yolk Strong. You might see some of the Conquer the Gauntlet pros mixing around on there, doing some obstacles and stuff like that. So yeah, good brand. I've been hanging out with them and working with them for the last couple of years, so check them out. So Bobby, if you're not familiar with Bobby, he just last month released the Mud Gear commercial, Made Tougher, and he's also the guy who shot the OCR America 2 footage, and he's also the guy who has been on the Ultra OCR main commentary the last couple episodes. So yeah, what else you got, Bobby?
Yeah, pretty much just a filmmaker. I'm a gaffer and a DP in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I have a good time telling stories about whatever I think is interesting at the moment,
I agree. All right.
I look for interesting people doing interesting things, and then I just get really excited and try and make them let me come along while they do those things. And so I get to vicariously live my life through my friends like Evan.
Yeah, and speaking of finding interesting people and doing interesting things, that's how we ended up at this podcast, because a couple weeks ago you were like, hey, Evan, let's shoot an action scene. And he's like, you want to drive down to Tulsa in the middle of the week? And I was like, yeah, I do. So fast forward a couple hours and I'm in Tulsa, and he's like, yeah, I have a friend who's an MMA fighter. You guys will fight. And I was like, yeah, cool. No big deal. Just fighting. Just going to fight an MMA fighter. So that's who our third guest is, Colt Billingsly. So Colt, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Colt, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the fight scene and kind of Colt's background. So Colt was a multi-sport athlete growing up, right? So playing things like baseball, basketball, football throughout high school, and then got into wrestling and powerlifting. And then afterwards went on to practice jiu-jitsu for a couple of years, and then eventually got into MMA. So has a 1-0 record in professional jiu-jitsu and a 1-0 amateur MMA record. Holds a bronze and silver medal for regional and state tournaments for the American Grappling Federation. So Colt, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, sir. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good. Now, so if you haven't seen the footage, we'll drop the link in the show notes, but me and Colt did a fight scene that Bobby directed / edited / shot / basically did everything for. And I thought it came out really awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about Colt's background, kind of how he got into mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu, and some of what his training is like, and kind of how that relates to obstacle course racing. And then we're going to talk about the second half of the episode. We're going to talk about actually behind the scenes of filming that fight footage. So if this is your first time listening to the Strength and Speed podcast, it's primarily an obstacle course racing focused podcast. But what we do is, because OCR is new but sports are old, we bring on athletes from other sports and try to pick lessons learned based off their training and stuff like that. So Colt, let's start off with your background, right? So how did you end up getting involved in jiu-jitsu and then eventually MMA?
Well, man, I mean, I've always been interested in the sport, back when I was younger and in high school. That was kind of around the time when, we had the guys like Forrest Griffin and, Stephen Bonner had that crazy fight for the Ultimate Fighter. And, we'd always be going and, going in Hooters and stuff, me and all my friends, and, trying to armbar each other in, your buddy's living room and stuff like that. So I'd always been interested in it. But as I got older, I had an experience. I was basically assaulted physically randomly at no reason one evening. And, I'd had a little bit of wrestling training and stuff. So I I was able to defend myself in that situation, but afterwards, I was thinking about it. I was like, man, that could have went really, really bad, really quick, you know? So fast forward a couple years later, I was working at a Whole Foods. I was just checking out, you know, people up at the cash register, and a guy comes through and he had a jiu-jitsu t-shirt on. And I was like, hey, man, that's dope. You train. I've always been interested in that. And he said, yeah, man, you know, he told me about his gym and told me to come on out. And I went out and I did a free lesson. And I really enjoyed it, but I was kind of put off. I was kind of, you know, kind of insecure at the time and everything. So it took me a while to go back, but I eventually did go back. And after that, I got hooked. I was in there every day. And, you know, 5-6 years later, I'm still training, you know, 4 times a week or more. I'm in there as much as I can with work and everything. And I just, you know, eventually started competing with jiu-jitsu and just doing local tournaments and things like that. And I convinced the coach, his name's Todd Ryan out at Ryan BJJ. That's where I train in Tulsa. I convinced him to start teaching me some striking because he had been a professional MMA fighter, you know, years prior before he had opened his gym and everything. So, yeah, just got him to start kind of showing me some striking and this and that. And at that time, it was just myself and him. He would, you know, do pads and things with me. But eventually, you know, more and more people start getting interested in it, seeing me train up there with him. And we've got us a pretty solid team now, man. We got 2 pro fighters and I think 4 or 5 AMI fighters on our team right now. So, yeah, things are going good, man. I've been training, like I said, about 6 years now, I believe. Training MMA maybe about 3 of those years, I'd say, 3 or 4.
Nice. So tell me about like a weekly training schedule for you. Like, what do you know, how many times are you working on, you know, grappling separately from striking and then kind of putting it all together on a different day? Or are you doing all of it all the time? Or are you doing conditioning some days? Like, what's a week in your life regarding MMA/BJJ look like?
Right. Well, as far as the grappling aspect, yeah, you separate out your skill sets into different, you know, the different classes he'll put on. So usually, you know, I mean, he has jujitsu. We're a jujitsu gym primarily. So he has jujitsu classes every day. He'll have, you know, beginner classes and advanced classes, you know, that I think they alternate the days that they're on. So, I mean, even on days that I train MMA up there, I'm also training just straight grappling and jiu-jitsu. We also have a wrestling coach up there. He does some wrestling classes 1 day a week. So, but as far as the training sessions, we'll come in. I'll probably do, you know, I usually do some fundamental skill work when we come in. We'll do about an hour of just like working combinations, good technique, you know, throwing your punches and footwork drills, things like that. And the second hour we go into, we'll have our jiu-jitsu class and we'll work. You'll start out, you'll come in, you sit, and he'll demonstrate technique basically. So, you know, you could be going over a various amounts of, you know, techniques that he'll have scheduled. And he'll show the technique and you drill it with your partner. And then for about 30 minutes, you just live roll and you kind of try out what you were working on, or you can just, you know, whatever you feel you need to work on. It's just live sparring basically. And what's really great about it in jiu-jitsu is you can spar live at a fast pace, but you don't really risk injuring yourself as much as like striking sparring.
Right.
So I really enjoy
100%. So the Army, it was like mid to late 90s, switched to primarily like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu type of combatives program because of that reason. Because you could go hard and you could do like essentially a fully resisted opponent and get that like warrior mindset.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
you get the feel of what a real life scenario is going to be, you know, what it's going to be like. And like you said, you're not really risking hurting each other so much. And you're really getting in those, you know, that cardio work that you're going to need to compete because you can train at that pace.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you grapple, the first time I ever grappled with someone, I couldn't believe how quickly I was out of breath. You know,
it's insane, man. Like every skill set is like a different type of cardio that you have to develop. Like your stand-up cardio is different from your grappling. That's different from, you know, even just like people like you who do endurance type sports. Like that's a whole different cardio set. I feel it's insane. Like how different activities affect your body.
Right on, right on. And I like some of the things you're saying there about training with a purpose and kind of testing things out. I think as an obstacle course racer, we can sometimes we're just kind of blindly going through motions without actually like thinking about and breaking things down and trying new techniques during our training sessions there.
Yeah, like what are some techniques that like you train? Like what's like an exercise that you would do?
So I mean, specifically for typically after a rest day, I would go to like a ninja gym or an obstacle course racing gym and work on a specific obstacle with a low heart rate, just so I get that movement down and I build that muscle memory of success, right? So a hard one is the pegboard. So I start my training session off, and rather than like waiting till I'm exhausted and trying to do the pegboard and like failing a whole bunch and then like losing confidence, I start off with the pegboard and I'll do it a couple of times, 5 sets of pegboard to build that muscle memory and build that pathway of success before moving on to, more. I still use a lot of weights. I'll still do a lot of like strength training and work on back, and then using body weight first to kind of exhaust it, and then using like machines to kind of fine tune and instead of using a normal pull-up bar on the machine, like a lat pull-down machine, I'll put a rig grip on there. So I'll like put a Force 5 rope or a Force 5 like nunchuck and pull down with that. So my hand's in the correct position as it would be for a race, and I'm building that pathway. This is how my hand feels using this, grabbing this exact grip, pulling down, and generating power that way.
See, that's interesting, man, that you say that. I agree 100% as far as you need to approach training your technical aspects, like your actual technique. You need to be fresh when you do that, I feel, to get the best reps out of it, if that makes sense. And that's interesting too, that you're doing things that are similar to guys will train, grip strength and things like that with jiu-jitsu. So, I mean, there's a lot of similarities really in, how you're approaching your training.
That's interesting. Yeah, I actually, one of my articles I wrote a couple years ago, I compared MMA because a lot of like from my understanding, a lot of the top MMA guys will have like coaches that are experts on a very narrow field, and then also like a coach that's more of a MMA generalist, and then they kind of, all right, I'm going to train my striking with this guy, train my grappling with this guy, and then I'm going to have another coach that brings it all together.
Yeah, that's imperative, man. I feel in order to really hit, different levels, you need a specialist to show you, or at least, someone who's been shown by a specialist. But that's imperative in order to really, fine tune your technique.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the special forces, U.S. Army Special Forces is the same thing, right? So we're not the best shooters or the best drivers in the world, but I hire the best shooters to teach me just shooting. And then I hire a different guy who teach me just driving. And then I hire a different guy to teach me, whatever skill set you want, in the world. So basically I built like, they spend all their time focused on this one thing. So they are very, very proficient at it to a level that, essentially I'll never get there. But by bringing them in, I can absorb a lot more of that information at a rapid pace. Because we have so many competing interests, because it's not just like walking into a room and shooting someone, right? Like you got to infill and you got to exfil and you got to plan and you got to, you may need a method to get into the room. So some breaching in there, some maybe explosive or mechanical, like it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. So, which is why we use that specialist approach to train ourselves.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of helps to be able to kind of, compartmentalize your different skills and to access them separately, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
That's something that I think that would behoove probably a lot of people who are not super serious in like OCR. Say like the idea of, okay, I saw that obstacle is very different from I can do that in my sleep.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Especially like, go ahead.
I was going to say, even like obstacles, so when I go to a CTG, I've done those obstacles so many times. It's like, it's muscle memory at that point. My body's just doing, like, I'm not even thinking while I'm on an obstacle. I'm just doing. Even if it's a similar obstacle at a different race, my pace will be slower just because I'm not used to the nuances of it, right? Like the thickness of the bar, how slippery it might be based on the conditions. So there's and I like to practice on those until I become this muscle memory. And then I don't think at all. I just do when I'm going across.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's similar to like, these combinations and things that you teach yourself and you drill repeatedly. And, even with jujitsu technique, you train these things repeatedly and ad nauseum so that when you're exhausted, your body will react and your body will throw it. Like you were saying, it's just calling on your muscle memory to perform the task. So, I mean, it's kind of, now that we're getting to talking about this, it's like, man, like everything's so similar as far as like how you're approaching your training.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing I think about the most with that is, so like I made a few videos a couple of years ago about a couple of different obstacles that gave me a lot of trouble. One of them, of course, was Pegatron from Conquer the Gauntlet, which for anybody who doesn't know is basically just a horizontal pegboard where you can't use your legs, right? But the obstacle that gave me the most difficulty before that was the Stairway to Heaven. The verticality of that meant that if you were to just use your arms like I tend to do because I'm kind of a large guy, like you get tired very quickly. And so if your arms are tired and you're already like exhausted and you're breathing hard and you're kind of redlining at your cardio, it's just not an easy obstacle to do until you learn how to incorporate your legs, right? How to do like a good bicycle, how to use your whole body to get from one board to the next. And it very quickly became like my best obstacle. And I don't have amazing grip strength or anything. I just really know that movement very well, and I can do it without thinking about it. It just kind of comes naturally now.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like hearing him talking about that, it's interesting because I feel like in any kind of physical endeavor, like it's like small, minute, like, a way you turn your hip, or it's just small movements within your body that make a huge difference as far as how you can perform.
Yeah, 100%. I started taking some martial arts more seriously last year, and the number of it's like, all right, do a roundhouse kick. It's like, yeah, I know how to do a roundhouse kick. You just like I swing my leg over, but then it's like, no, well, your foot's got to be your planting foot's got to be in this position. Your hips have to rotate over. Like there's all these little like you're saying, all these like tiny movements, and it takes your what I felt was a strong kick and really like amplifies it when you actually like fine tune all the little pieces and
right,
makes them so much stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when you decided to actually fight, right? So you did your first fight, you won. Take me through some of the mindset you had kind of going into that. With OCR, right? I'm on a start line. There's 50, 100, maybe several hundred other people there, right? So like not everyone's paying attention to me, right? There maybe even no one paying attention to me. When you're in MMA, it's you and one other dude, right? And it's not like they're looking someplace else. Like they're looking at you too. So like, tell me about your mindset going in.
No, honestly, I felt, because this was my first show that I was on, about coming up on 2 months back. And honestly, I had a great mindset going in. I just kind of, you just got to put yourself in a place of like absolute confidence. And like, basically I was telling myself that like, I'm an expression of everything. And this is how I'm expressing myself to like infinity. And if I go out and I give everything in my body, and even if I fail, like that's almost even more glorious. Like there's only glory in this. So that's kind of how I approached it going out there. So I was surprised really, because and I mean, I've done jiu-jitsu competitions in front of people on a big stage, but it's not quite the same as going out to like have a fist fight with somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, but it really just, it's telling yourself, like, at least for me, and I think everyone kind of approaches things differently. And, obviously everyone's, has a different way of perceiving the world or whatever. But really that's the best way I can explain it. Like whatever's going to happen is going to happen because it's supposed to happen, but I'm going to go and I'm going to dump my soul out basically. And that's how I did it. And I turned out victorious this time.
Nice. Yeah, I know. I feel like a lot of people sometimes don't try stuff because they're afraid of failure, right? Like well, what happens if I fail? It's like, well, You fail, you deal with it, and you move on. You try again, or you find something else, and it's not a big, like, I don't know. I don't
Oh,
think
for
it's,
sure. I play, and I think Bobby as well. We're musicians, right? So it's kind of like if you were practicing a scale and you hit a wrong note and you just fell apart. Oh God, like I can't play anymore. Like that wouldn't make it. It doesn't make any sense in that aspect. So you have to approach everything like that. So I hit the wrong note. We're just gonna start over. You know?
Yeah, I was actually looking on randomly. I saw this quote today. It said, embarrassment is the cost of entry. If you aren't willing to look like a foolish beginner, you'll never become a graceful master. So, just thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Actually, I've actually found something good on Instagram. That was someone posted that off Instagram. I was like, oh, that's actually good. Normally, I don't typically like Instagram quotes. I think that's a lot of false motivation, right? Like it's not real motivation. It's like a spark, right? It's like, oh, this is a cool quote, and then you're like, eh.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't actually lead to long-term success. Like I think a lot of those Instagram quotes, they just don't go anywhere, right? Like I think it's the person trying to self-motivate themselves rather than like actually their expression coming out. But anyway.
Yeah.
I think that's really great though, because when you think about sport in general, I think everybody should do sports. Like all three of us have done sports our entire lives, and I think the best thing about it is that it takes you out of like your head, like I could beat that guy, to a place where you have to actually try and beat that guy, and you have to confront yourself in a way that you don't in any other way in part of your life. Like it's completely different.
Oh, 100%. Like even, with sports and things, and as far as just like, sports psychology and how I was talking about, you kind of got to put yourself in just like this state of absolute confidence. Like even though I've competed in sports since I was a child and I've won games and lost games and this and that, like it took me until honestly, if maybe 2 years ago to get to a point where it was like, I can achieve things if I attempt them, if that makes sense. Like, it's not just going out to play this game or something. It's if you make an attempt and you set a goal and you attack it, and you come back and you see, these are the things I did wrong, and you calculate how you're going to attack it next time, you can only get better. And it's taken me, like, I'm almost 30 now, and I'm just now realizing that. So I'm trying to take that and apply that to all other aspects of my life.
Good stuff. Now,
oh yeah,
I know when we think of MMA, we think there's like, I think people's default is like, all right, there's absolutely no rules. You just go in there and brawl. But I know there are some rules. Is the one? Can you tell us some of the rules that are in MMA, and then two, if any of them different from like the league or whatever the competition you fought in versus like UFC per se?
Yeah, well, I mean, the UFC is a professional organization, and there are professional fights that are put on by the organization I fought in. I mean, there's a bunch of different promotions that put on shows all over at various levels. But the main rules are between amateur and professional. So if you're and basically the only difference in amateur and professional is if you accept money for the bout, like if you accept a show, basically. But other than that, if you're an amateur, the only difference in the rules, I believe, are that you can't elbow. And obviously, like you can't poke people in the eye, and you can't do groin strikes and things like that.
Right.
But that's the main difference. Is I believe the only one I can think of is that you can't elbow people until it's a professional bout.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming is your ultimate goal to like make it to the UFC or make it to a professional level? Like or you just kind of taking it by ear and taking it by feel and seeing where it goes?
Well, yeah, man, like I said, even the fight I took, this was kind of like a spiritual or like, a growth type of thing for me in my life. Is the main reason I took the fight and decided to compete. So, I mean, I'm just riding it where it takes me. I would, if I did make it to the UFC, that would be insane and that would be great. But, I mean, honestly, Tulsa's MMA scene's kind of blowing up. There's quite a few guys, even a guy that I grew up with out here, in the little Hodunk town that I'm from. played basketball with him. He recently got a UFC contract, so it's not inconceivable. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard work and fighting and getting in there and correcting your mistakes and then taking it. I think it's about making smart moves, you know, fighting at the right times and choosing your fights correctly at a certain point. But at the level I'm at right now, I'm still pretty entry level.
Right.
So I'm at it just to get experience right now. Just get in the cage, get what it feels like to be in a cage. Because, like, you know, I've trained and you spar with people, and I've had really hard, you know, they talk about gym wars and stuff like that. I've had really hard sparring sessions, and I've, you know, sparred professional level fighters, all kinds of people. But it's not, you can't fake the funk until you get in there. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same. And once you're in there and it's, you know, you're really trying to put someone out, you can't know that feeling until you do it. And it's small things like the cage I was in was actually really small. So, like, you have to adjust how you move and how you slip and how the angles you take out from when you're striking and being struck at and things like that. But, you know, yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to take it wherever it'll take me and have a good time and enjoy the ride while I'm young enough to do it, you know?
Yeah. Sounds cool. I actually just finished the audiobook called Beast. It's about a bunch of MMA fighters, varying levels. Some of them were in the UFC. I think some of them were trying to get in. And it was pretty interesting to see, like, some of the behind the scenes and some of the psychology of, like, this guy's interviewing all these fighters and following them on their journey. I think it spanned a couple of years, the actual book. And one of the things I was surprised with, though, was, like, the basic level UFC contract was, like, they're calling it 8 and 8, which is like you get $8,000 to show up. And then if you get like $8,000 if you win. And I was like, that's still not a lot of money for, like, you getting punched in the face, right? Like, if that's your only job, like, just getting obliterated in the ring, like, that's not a lot of money. And then you'd have to fight several times a year, right? So, like,
for sure, yeah. And I mean, most people have, like, and I think it's changed some since they went to, like, you know, they had Reebok, and I think they got Venom now as their, like, main sponsor or whatever. But used to, guys had sponsors. So a lot of times guys, like, I know listening to Brendan Schaub talk, he said that he would get paid more from his sponsors than he did to show and fight. He'd make $250,000 off all his sponsorships or whatever for the fight and the whole camp and all that. But then, you know, his show money was like a percentage of that, which is insane if you think about, you know, how much money that these organizations generate compared to what they're given to, you know, in the game, they, you know, they call some people, they call them journeymen, you know, not the huge names. You know, you got your Conor McGregors and all those kind of guys. And those, it's kind of like you're saying, those lower level guys, you know, those lower ranked guys that are kind of fighting their way up still, they don't make a lot of money. You know, they make around 10 grand a fight, which to me, at my level now, when I hear that, I'm like, damn, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. But if that's your only job.
Right, yeah, but if that's what you're doing solely, you have to, I feel like you have to have sponsorships in order to make that work at that level. No, but I know, you know, a friend of mine that I was talking about, I say friend, I knew him as a child, but he was still I believe he was still working a job while he was fighting his, you know, he had 3 bouts, I think, in the UFC, and I think he won, maybe it was only 2, but he won them, and he was still working, you know what I mean, in between training. He'd get up and go train early in the morning, he'd go to work, and he'd come train at night, and then go home, do it again. So these guys are putting in, you know, it consumes their life, really, you know.
I think that's the norm for, like, when people say professional sports, people think like baseball, football, where these guys are getting paid multi-million-dollar contracts, right? Like, I think the norm for most professional sports that aren't, like, you know, one of the big 4, hockey, baseball, basketball, football, etc., is like people have day jobs and then they do it on the side and it supplements their income. And then additionally, like you were saying, the sponsorships, like even at my level in obstacle course racing, I get more benefits from sponsorships than I do from prize money. And I'm not winning, to be fair, like I'm not winning like the really big payout races, but most of my benefit comes from sponsors, like a accumulation of sponsors, and then my own Strength and Speed, essentially my own website that sells, books and apparel and some other stuff there. So, I mean, that's how I sustain my quote unquote racing career there.
Yeah, man, it's crucial. You got to get those sponsors and build it, and it's just building relationships with those people that, hey, you'll give me whatever it is for 2 months outside, going up to my fight, or as far as an event that you guys have. Yeah. Do you like travel around a lot?
Yeah, so I travel around, usually driving is the cheapest. Right, and, I like to take my family, but
you just do like regionally?
Yeah, so I'll do regionally for shorter races, and then for the I specialize in kind of 12 and 24-hour stuff, and those I'll typically fly to. Those ones I'll travel a little bit further to. But if it's shorter, like if it's 10 miles and lower, I'm typically driving, and basically I've won a 4-digit prize before, but when we start getting close to $1,000 and above, I typically the bigger names come out and start pushing me off the podium.
Right. No, I get it. Yeah, man, it's, we were talking about our cardio and stuff and the things we're doing to train our cardio. That was one of the biggest things I noticed shooting this choreographed scene with Bobby, was how tired I got and how quickly, like trying to do these movements perfectly over and over. And kind of, you're doing these movements that aren't, economic to your cardio. Like you have to be very theatrical with the way you're throwing a punch, so it, you're expending more energy with it than you would, throwing a normal jab. I've got my jab down to where I could throw 3,000 of those a day if I needed to. But then after 10-20 minutes of us like, I think if I threw this, I'd react this way, and after about 30 minutes of that, I was like, man, like I'm kind of tired.
Yeah, the next morning I woke up and I felt like I'd done a race the day before. Like my back was kind of sore. I was like, man, I'm fucking tired.
Like, no, I'm not even kidding you. I felt more beat up than when I had my fight.
No way.
I'm not playing. Yeah. I woke up that next day and I was like, God, like my shoulder was sore. My back's, I'm getting up. I'm like, my lower back and stuff, just from, doing these kind of abnormal movements we're not used to doing,
Yeah, I had scrapes on my shoulder. I had like one underneath my left nipple, which I don't even know how that happened. I had cuts on the inside of my right arm. It was pretty wild. So let's start transitioning to that. So Bobby's been kind of silent for a lot of this. We're gonna start bringing him more into the conversation. So let's start with Bobby. Where did this idea come from to shoot a fight scene, and how did that start about?
Well, a big part of it was that I was really, really excited about the new Mortal Kombat movie. Like any other, 30-year-old human being, Mortal Kombat is like the coolest thing ever. Like, I mean, I used to pretend to be Liu Kang through my, entire pre-adolescence. And so when the new Mortal Kombat movie came out, I was like, oh, cool. Surely they're not going to just butcher this like every other movie ever that is a reboot. But of course, it came out and I had some issues with it, which weren't necessarily just the fight scenes, but either way, I started to get really interested in like what goes into actually shooting a fight scene. Because while I had, done punches and I did a music video for a band called Lone Wild, which had a couple of pretty big fight scenes. I actually did that with David Mainprice, who runs Battle of the Lions. You can go check that out on the band Lone Wild's YouTube. It's a fantastic video. We had David jumping over tables, and we actually built a table for him to throw my buddy Aaron through. But I'd never done a martial arts fight sequence. And so I started talking to Evan. I just kind of wanted to hang out because I missed him. And I was like, why don't you just drive down and let's hang out for a day and make something crazy. And because I was already working on this essay about all the things that was wrong about the Mortal Kombat movie, even though I still liked the idea, I still thought, what would it be like to do it ourselves? And that was really the whole point. That's really where he ended up. And so I met Colton on a shoot just 2 weeks before. We were shooting a music video, and he happened to be a PA, and he ended up being my rigger. Fantastic. It was, we just hit it off, and like, I enjoyed hanging out with him. I liked him, and I was like, you know what? I know these two guys who can fight in real life. Little did I know how much different screen fighting would be from actually fighting in real life.
Yeah, it's wild. So let's, so I show up to Bobby's, and he's like, all right. He's showing me all these YouTube videos of like, here's like professional stuntmen and professional fighters like going through movies and kind of nitpicking them and talking about some of the behind the scenes stuff. Because initially I was like, oh, I come down here, we throw a couple punches, it's no big deal. Bobby films some stuff, boom, we're done. And the more videos Bobby showed me about like behind the scenes, the more I was like, dude, we're in way over our heads. Like, I have no idea what we're doing. These are professional stuntmen. Like, I don't think we can make this look good. This is what I'm saying. I in my head, I didn't tell Bobby that. And then I was like, well, I'm sure Bobby's got everything like pre-planned out. And we got out there. We were like, all right, here's where we're going to shoot, kind of this playground. And me and Colt get out there, and he's like, all right, let's start figuring things out. And I was like, oh, we have no plan. I was like, I don't, in my head, I'm like, I don't think this is going to go well. But yeah, we just started kind of figuring things out. And when we were the first couple of moves we did, I know me and Colt comes out, and I mean, I know you're holding back, but like, you felt so fast to me, like just like throwing some of your jabs at first. I was like, oh damn, I gotta level up a second. And then we also had to, like, me and Bobby were talking about this before, like we had to adjust some of the things we did, right? Like saying we got to throw kind of more theatrical punches, and like, you're an MMA guy and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. And when we first started, like, all right, so we throw these punches, and it was like, and then we'd immediately go to the ground. And I was like, yeah, I agree with that statement. And it was like, well, we can't immediately go to the ground, because then that makes the fight scene not as good, theatrical. We had to adjust some of the things that we would normally do for kind of a real fight.
Well, I thought it was interesting. Like, I mean, I'm not near the video editor that Bobby is, but it was similar to kind of like when you have all this footage and you start cutting it up and moving it around, it kind of just comes together the way it should. It just kind of plays itself out when you start messing around with it. And I felt that's kind of how the scene went. Once we kind of started like, if I threw this punch and this kick, I'd react this way, and then, we'd fall. It just kind of started snowballing together after a while. So I thought that was really interesting as far as like choreographing it. The only thing I thought that was difficult was trying to incorporate the environment into it, to try to, tell more. I guess it's to tell more of a story, I guess, as to what what's going on, what's around you. But I thought that was to me, that was what was most difficult. It was like, how do I make it look like I would swing on this monkey bar on purpose to kick you? Or, you know what I mean? I go out of my way to do that, but it looks cool. So how do I incorporate this into this?
Yeah, the recording of it was kind of wild. I couldn't believe how much it wasn't just the actors. It was also the photographer, the filmmaker, and the editor kind of putting all these things together, because there was times when we'd throw a punch, and my punch would be like, 6 inches away from Colt. And, based off of the angle and like where Bobby has the camera can't see that third dimension. So it looks like my fist is going right towards Colt's face, and Colt reacts like he got hit. And then it looks like a real punch. Like the movie magic was just kind of just something I'd never really thought of when watching other movies, and kind of how the lack of third dimension on a film, makes things look realistic or not realistic type of stuff.
Well, yeah, Bobby, something you don't really like hear about when it comes to the way that, like big budget Hollywood movies work, or Hollywood or wherever, is that there's oftentimes an entire crew specifically made up of stunt people who are doing all of the action scenes parallel to all of the story scenes. There may even be another camera crew. And so the director of the film, the credited director of the film, quote unquote, may not have even had any input on the action. It's just the people whose job it is to make action look good. And so they may film some with the actual actor and then some or most of all of the action sequences with a stunt performer. And so the amount of specialization required basically is just really intense, because it's an art form of itself. It's completely separate from just fighting or just filmmaking. It's something special and unique. It's a hybrid of the two. So here's something interesting as well. My initial thought when I wanted to say, okay, cool, I want to experiment. I'd like to make a fight scene. So the first thing I thought was, I need to find 2 good fighters. Fortunately, I already did. But what I didn't realize was how little screen fighting actually had to do with actual fighting. It's more like dancing. And so I think that Colt caught on to this really quickly, because we're both musicians. So I kind of wanted to ask Colt, you seem to like relax into it quickly. How were you thinking about that as an athlete and a musician when it came to timing your punches and kicks and the movements with Evan?
Honestly, I mean, I don't really know if I thought about it too much. I would think, how do I need to throw, how would I need to throw this to make it look realistic, but at the same time entertaining to see it? You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I guess that's all I really thought of.
I was just going to say, one of the things I learned from this, I look at action movies differently now after filming this, is because when I was watching some action movies and they cut after every punch, it's like one punch cut. And I was like, are they, now that I've filmed an action sequence, I was like, are they even fighting, right? If you're just throwing one punch and cutting after every one versus me and Colt would throw a couple punches or, exchanges back and forth, and then the camera would cut. Honestly, we could have run through the fight scene probably from start to finish without cutting if we needed to. But we ended up breaking into segments just to make it easier to shoot, to make sure we get all the right angles and stuff like that. But, when I look at fight scenes now, if they're cutting after every punch, I'm less impressed than I used to be. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I really pushed you guys in that regard, because that's something that I have a big problem with when I'm watching movies. And it's not because I'm a snob. Well, maybe it has a little bit to do with that, but it has more to do with the fact that it doesn't feel real anymore, right? If it's just a cut after every single hit, it doesn't feel like they're actually fighting. I mean, people who watch movies, we're smart to that. We've seen that over and over again, because we've also seen MMA. We've seen 2 people actually fighting toe to toe. So we know what it looks like when people are fighting and are really at one another's throats. You can tell that there's movie magic happening, even if you're not cognizant of it, presently saying, oh, well, he just cut. He didn't actually do that. When you see people doing a longer stretches of a fight at once, it really does feel like you're actually witnessing a conflict. And I think that's really important, and why I'm glad I got you guys to do it.
Yeah, one of my favorite fight scenes is Tony Jaa in The Protector. There's a 7-minute unbroken shot of him just walking up a spiral staircase, just literally beating the hell out of people. And I know in Asia, they don't have the same, they have less safety precautions, and they care less about hurting people. So Tony Jaa is really laying into some of these dudes, there's I watched a YouTube video of stuntmen react to that scene in The Protector, and they're like, man, these stunt dudes and Tony Jaa are just abusing each other nonstop, because they had to do that. They had to do that scene several times because I think they said it was I don't know, remember how many, but he's like, this is the 5th or 6th take. You can tell because one of the stunt guy has a bandage on his head already from he's got a bandana on his head, but it's a bandage because he's previously been cut open on a previous take.
Well, even in our stuff, man, I kicked you in the throat, and I took a couple knees to the hip, and oh man, when you accidentally take those shots, plus on top of opening up your whole body to the shot to sell it, yeah. I can imagine the injuries these guys sustain, dude.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about Colt. Talk a little bit about the difference in a strike in screen fighting versus like actually fighting? Because like generally, like if you're actually fighting, you want to leave yourself open for the shortest amount of time, but it's kind of the opposite when you're like doing this, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like it's kind of like the straightest point between, the straightest path between 2 points is straight. You know what I mean? Between them. So when you're throwing a strike, you're trying to throw it as straight as possible. And I was talking about earlier, you want to have like economy of movement, and that's totally the opposite to when you're trying to be theatrical with a strike. You're open, you're really looping shots and throwing them really wide and with your whole body instead of, with precision to give. And it also, when you do that, you're almost, I felt like I was trying to kind of telepathically let Evan know where my shot was coming next, so he could preemptively, like, be able to block and anticipate where it was coming from. So as far as striking for, in sport, you're trying to conceal that kind of thing. I'm trying to not let you know where my strikes are coming from. You're throwing, feints and things like that, and you want it to be quick, and you want to like kind of whip your shots back and forth. Like, the end of your fist basically is the end of the whip. And with the punches we were throwing and the kicks and things that we were throwing for the video, they were really, really open, kind of, I'd have my arm stretched out really wide on a hook instead of, just raising my elbow and throwing them more from my chin. So I thought that was interesting. But as far as like the kicks and things that we were throwing, I felt like though, as far as technique on those, though, that was very similar. I didn't really feel like we had to change anything on that. It's more just on the punches you're throwing.
Yeah, I agree. The kicks, you basically.
Evan, how did that feel for you? Is that the same way?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I know when we were like, all right, here's what the next move would be. My initial move was like, all right, well, now I'd throw like a jab and then a cross or something like that. But like, it's hard to make that look as good on camera or for him to like react, because like it's a straight line, right? Like my fist is just going out and coming back right away. So we ended up throwing a lot more hooks, and it, like Colt was saying, like the hooks were wider than you'd like kind of throw them in real life per se. But yeah, and I'd agree with that. The punches were different. The kicks were basically the same. The only difference is you basically pulled it right at the end, so you don't impact with full force. So you kind of a little more of like a thrust than a snap at the end is kind of really the only difference. And the other thing I'd say, Bobby's like, oh, I know 2 guys that can fight. Well, like for kind of like the special forces side, right? Like hand-to-hand fighting is kind of several levels down on the priority list, actually. So any kind of fighting I've picked up is largely due to like personal hobby, and there's a little bit from the military, but there's not as much as I think people would normally assume, right? Because in the military, the fighting, like hand-to-hand fighting, is option 3, right? So like option 1 is if I go into a room and someone starts attacking me, I just take my rifle and I muzzle punch them in the face or wherever I can hit them, and that creates So I create space and then I just shoot them. Or option 2 is if I can't get my rifle free, I draw a sidearm, shoot them, or I pull a knife and stab them. Also part of option 1 and 2 is basically like my buddy comes in and my buddy just shoots the guy who's trying to tackle me. And then option 3 is then you kind of close the distance, achieve the dominant position type of thing. We trained it a little bit, but there's just a lot more stuff that happens beforehand where that's like, your next go-to maneuver. So
yeah, I definitely would think of military like fighting to be more like Jean-Claude Van Damme-esque in my mind.
And it used to be. It definitely used to be. There was like a kind of a
stabbing someone's eye out with your thumb if you got to, like.
Yeah, like I said, it used to be. It's gone through a couple of different changes. In the mid-'90s, they switched to more Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the kind of spirit of core thing. And then in about 2009 or so, we started to kind of be like, all right, well, the BJJ works pretty good for the training, but like we also need to have like a tactical course where that basically teaches you those 3 options. And then it's a little more like guys in pads, and you show up in kit and you have like a dummy rifle, and then you kind of like practice those maneuvers more. Yeah, and there's also no rules, right? Like I can eye gouge, I can bite, I can stab. So
that's literally a fight for your life.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Are you taught those sorts of things? Like that's just randomly, like how to like effectively fight dirty?
Yeah, I mean, you should be. So I've never been through. I went through the program like 2008 or 2009 when it was primarily BJJ focused. And one of the drills, a side note, this is just a funny story. One of the drills they teach you is called the clench drill, where one of the instructors has boxing gloves on, and you are supposed to achieve the clench. So you're supposed to essentially lock up with him and take him to the ground. And what it turns into is just like the instructor just like punching students in the face. So it's the only kind of thing stupid about it is he knows you're going for like the clench, and you're not allowed to strike him. So like I can't fake or anything to kind of set him up for like a good takedown. So basically, like I'm just running at this dude's legs while he's like pummeling me in the face. It's kind of a side note. I think they took that actually out. But if you have a good instructor, they're supposed to teach you all that like dirty fighting type stuff in like the tactical course when you actually go through that. And there are guys that have to use. I've never had to use any of that stuff downrange. The closest two stories I have of using hand-to-hand downrange are one. We were breaching a house with two doors, and part of the platoon went straight, and then I took part of the platoon to the left, and I basically hip checked. I basically body breached the door, and I slammed some old dude against the wall like super hard because he was on the other side of the door. And then he just basically went to the ground, so I didn't really have to do anything. But and then the other story is we actually we wanted to confirm that we were at the correct house, and we brought the husband in to make sure it was actually the correct house and he wasn't lying to us. And the guy's wife basically like lunged and grabbed onto him and refused to let go, and we had to like physically, like several of the soldiers had to physically pry this woman off of her husband because. Back in Saddam's era, they would take people away and essentially execute them. But we were just taking him away and keeping him for a day or two and then releasing him. So, but you'd be surprised how hard that woman was holding on to him. It was insane. We had some big dudes trying to pull her off. I've never seen anything like it. So,
I was just gonna say, like, we have 115-pound women that they get up to like blue and purple belt in the gym, and the full grown men, like 200 and some pound men that come in and try to control these women. It's insane. Like just the knowledge of like balance and with their knowledge of balance and leverage and things like that. But to think of someone like, I have to save my husband's life and they're going to grab onto someone. I can't imagine how hard it would be to peel someone off someone's body.
Yeah, it was surprisingly difficult.
Oh yeah. Like, I think the best thing about, just like kind of going back to our fight scene, but incorporating that is that we weren't really like worried about like, oh, this is a straight wushu fight or like, this is a particular like set of moves, like particularly because Colt was saying, we were using the environments, like we were just doing whatever we thought would look like interesting, one, and two, be able to tell the story. So like, as long as it was visually interesting, anything goes. So like just like Evan was saying, like when I took you guys out there, I didn't really know what it was going to be, and I just kind of said, "Hey, what do you think would happen?" And then I would only be saying, "Okay, I think this would look good to the camera." Like, would you, Evan? Would you have any input on like what it was like to choreograph the scene and kind of come up with their movements?
I'd say we just kind of, both of us, I'd say, wanted to go to the ground real quick, and that just didn't work really well. So we kind of had to adjust and kind of, we throw a couple of combinations and then create something that would create a short break, which would also allow us to kind of rehearse it in smaller chunks. That way we could kind of rehearse it in chunks and then you kind of put it all together to create an entire fight. But
I was just saying, I think that also aided in how Bobby could, shoot if we chopped it up like that, and then Bobby was able to shoot the different segments and then kind of string them together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I mean, Bobby would, I don't know if you have any other comments for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it's just a dance, right? Like it has to have a rhythm. from the beginning to end, a fight scene is if it's a part of a bigger movie, right? Well, then there's a story that's happening across from the, minute 1 to minute 90 or whatever. But then there are all like the microcosms of a story. You move into like the acts, which are, they're between 3 and 5 big chunks that you kind of like process writing a film in. But then even within a fight scene, just like any other kind of scene, it has to tell a story within itself. And so some of the things that we did were to break it up into really small chunks so that, it's just like 6 or 7 moves strung together. And then we would take the final movement and choreograph that one in a way to where we can move the camera, right? So then we could find another place to put the camera so that we could keep the action moving, keep your attention kind of on what was happening, but also give you something else to kind of latch on to as we move from kind of one section of the fight to the next. But we also did other things to kind of show what was important from one scene to the next. Like, the hammer, passing the hammer around was important to show like power transferring from Evan to Colt to Evan and back and forth. And so it was a dance, and we broke it up so that we were able to digest it, but also so that we could tell a story from beginning to end.
All right, well, let's start wrapping it up. I know, one, if you haven't seen the fight scene, definitely go back and watch it. I'm going to drop the link down below. It's also part of Bobby does like a, long talk on why, some of the problems he had with Mortal Kombat. Side note, me and Bobby were talking offline. I think I finally realized why I liked it. I think it's because the bar has been set so low for video game to movie adaptations. Because I rewatched House of the Dead randomly after playing the arcade game, and I was like, this is really terrible. Like, I have to stretch my imagination to even make connections between the video game and the movie. And you look at you look at Mario Brothers, you look at Double Dragon. I mean, House of the Dead 2, right? Like, I've just seen so many video game movies that they take almost nothing from their source material. It's just terrible. So I think I finally saw something where they use a lot of the source material, and I was like, this is good enough. Like, yes, success. It's like,
absolutely. Well, I mean, like Mortal Kombat, the new movie is not a complete dumpster fire. Just like I say, it's a really beautiful thing. It's really well shot. There's some good moments, like some really funny stuff. It's not totally bad.
Yeah.
I was
it's not Mortal Kombat Annihilation bad, which is a complete dumpster fire.
Woo!
That's one of the worst. That is one of the worst martial arts movies I've ever seen. Period.
It is the most unintentional comedy.
Oh, it's so
ever.
Bad. It's so bad. It doesn't get better with time.
You're absolutely right. It does not get better with time.
All right, let's start wrapping it up. Any final thoughts, Bobby, or Colt, for the shooting of the fight scene?
No, man, I had a lot of fun. It gave me a new perspective on, the actors that are doing this well. And, it's, I've been a big fan of like Jet Li movies from the 80s and things like that. And now that I've actually, attempted doing that, seeing the amount of skill and just physical fitness that it takes to do that, it's opened my eyes up to that. I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to maybe working on that little short that Bobby was talking about getting going.
Yeah, this little thing that we've already made was only ever supposed to really kind of be like kind of dipping our toes in the pool, right? Like trying to figure out like, all right, what would go into doing something like this on a little larger scale. So we've had a lot of good feedback, and I think that it might be time to, I don't know, maybe do this on an actual short film. So, who knows?
Big things come from Bobby Ross, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. We got some other stuff working in the background that's not public yet. So I'm excited. Looking forward to that. Before we get going, tell us something people would be surprised to know about you. So we'll start off with Colt and then jump to Bobby, and I'll try to figure out something that kind of closely aligns.
I don't know if you'd be surprised about it, but I make beats, man. We discussed being musicians earlier in the podcast, but yeah, I play the banjo and I make beats, man. I make hip hop beats.
Oh, cool. Interesting. You have a YouTube page or anything, or are you just kind of
I don't. I got a project I'm working on with a local rapper here in Tulsa. His name's Cavell. You Be the Hero, he goes by. But he's a very talented artist, and we've got an album that we're working on, so you guys can look forward to seeing that for too long.
Cool. We'll try to find a link or something to drop down below when this publishes.
Yes, sir.
So they can find that. Bobby, you got anything?
I absolutely love painting Warhammer miniatures. Like I love wargaming, and I'm a terrible painter, but I like to do it anyway. And so like I've got giant boxes full of paints and paint brushes, and a lot of tiny little miniatures lying around.
Oh, interesting. I did notice the miniatures when I was over at your place. So, but
oh yeah.
I'm not sure if I used this one already. My wife, so I'm not artistic at all, but my wife is very artistic. So if you ever come over to my house and see anything that's clearly like someone painted up on the wall or some sort of design, it's my wife. She's like, all the art in our house is all her. So besides obviously things like a movie poster or something like that, but so that's all her. And then one of my friends I went to high school with, more of an acquaintance now, but he's done some pretty cool artwork that I have up in my basement. So like it's called Knights of Valor, basically 4 knights. It's some pretty cool artwork, and
it's so good.
Yeah, he's done some mashups with or he's been like artistic designs for like Punch Out and Rampage, and he did like a hybrid of Contra and Super Mario Brothers. So I have those prints too. Those are in my garage. Name's Anthony Petrie. He also did some work for Nickelodeon. I don't think he still works for them. I think he's just got his private company. So I'll drop that below too if I can remember to throw all these links. All right, let's start wrapping things up. Colt, any shout outs you want to give? Friends, family, sponsors, etc.?
Yeah, 100%, man. Shouts out to Warpath Godwear, Tribal Beast Fitness. Big shouts out to Green Ice Coffee out in Claremore, Oklahoma. They're great people. And shouts out to D'Alessandro's Italian Eatery here in Tulsa. If you're ever around, you need to hop in there, get a little bit of the risotto.
Dude, Colt, come over right now. We'll go to D'Alessandro's.
Dude, I'm into it. We can do it anytime. My homeboy I train with, he owns that. So.
No way.
Yeah. He's a great guy. But yeah, man, those are just a few of the sponsors that I can think of right off the top of my head that I'd like to shout out.
Right on. Bobby, what do you got? Anything exciting coming up, etc.?
No, y'all just grinding as always. You can check out my YouTube channel. If I can get like 30 more subscribers, then I can actually call it youtube.com/BobbyRossFilm. But otherwise, you can find me at Bobby Ross Film anywhere else, and I'm doing work constantly, trying to figure out what it would take to make you all like me just a little bit more.
Right on. All right, and if you're listening to this for the first time, head over to teamstrengthspeed.com. So that's the Strength and Speed website. Just redesigned part of it. So I used to have like some of my results and some of my stuff kind of buried a little bit further down in the site. I reorganized it, so it's a little bit up more towards the top. But I got some pretty interesting stuff up there, kind of highlighting some of Bobby's videos and putting them in a little more prominent place so people can find them because they're the best pieces of content that I'm a part of. So I wanted to highlight those a little bit more and kind of broken down, kind of put through my charity events under there. Books are available.
We should talk about the new Mudgear spot. It's live on their site, and that stars Evan Perperis.
That's true. So Mudgear. If you haven't seen the Mudgear Made Tougher spot, go watch it. I don't even know what you were doing because we shared it to like 1,000 groups. So it's on the Mudgear. Go to the Mudgear Facebook page. It's the first thing up there. It's on the Mudgear YouTube page. It's been a whole bunch of OCR groups. It's got athletes from Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team, Jay Flores, Amy Pajic, Miranda Huber, Jenny Overstreet. It's got athletes from Strength and Speed, Brenna Calvert, Jacob Stone, some CTG family, Laura Royster's in there, Michael Giles, who works with Bobby. And
that's my AD.
Yeah, and then some of the athletes from CrossFit Unconquered, the CrossFit gym in Leavenworth, Kansas. So it came out really good. I was just so happy with how it came out. So
Yeah, man, that thing was ill. I thought it looked. I was astonished at how good it was when I saw it. I was like, "Yo, Bobby!" I didn't know you was in it like that. I just meant, we was doing lights, and then I come see some of your camera work. I was like, "Damn, this guy's good, man."
Thanks, man.
So we'll try to drop all these links down below. Go watch the fight scene between me and Colt, and I'd like to thank Colt. I'm not going to tell you the ending, but I'd like to thank Colt for graciously giving me probably a lot more positive context than I would have if we actually fought for real. Because
come on now.
So, but it was fun, and I had a great time doing it, and yeah, it was just hoping we can do something like that again in the future. I think it was just the whole experience was a lot of fun. So cool. All right, we're going to wrap things up. Again, teamstrengthspeed.com. My books are available on there too. And my books, Ultra OCR Man, is also available in audiobook. And then Bobby's working on some other documentary type stuff for that. So just be on the lookout. A lot of good stuff coming at you. All right. We're going to get going.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Later.